Today on American Strangeness, we explore the complicated history of the Loveland Frogman. Most online sources trace the Loveland Frog back to a night around May 1955, although the details have the sparseness of a generalized urban legend. According to the story, an unnamed businessman was driving through Loveland when he saw a trio of 3 or 4 foot tall bipedal frog creatures near a bridge or along the road, one holding a sparking metal wand. The facts of this story, however, have melted somewhat in the fiery passage of time. What actually happened was that Robert Honeyut, a short-order chef in a newly opened Loveland restaurant, was driving northeast on the Madera-Loveland Pike in the sparsely populated vicinity of Hopewell Road at Branch Hill in Sims Township. It was May 25, 1955, and Honeyut was returning home from work at about 3:30 a.m. As he topped a rise in the road and came down a slight grade, his headlights revealed what he at first thought were 3 men kneeling down in the grass on the right side of the road. Honeyut parked about 10 feet away and got out to investigate, the headlights illuminating what he quickly realized weren't human at all. The beings were about 3.5 feet tall, their heads and garments a uniform shade of gray. Honeyut found them repulsive. Mouths that were large, straight, and appeared to lack lip muscles crossed nearly the entire width of their faces. The creatures' mouths reminded Honeyut of those belonging to frogs, which is the only detail in the original report that references the amphibians. They had indistinct noses and lacked eyebrows, although their eyes looked human. The beings had bald heads with rolls of fat running across the top, resembling, quote, the corrugated effect of a doll's painted-on hair. Their torsos were strangely lopsided and asymmetrical, with a larger right arm and a bulge swelling out from the right armpit down to the waist. Although not stated in the original report, this bulge is reminiscent of the balloon-like vocal sac possessed by most male frogs and toads. The chef couldn't discern if they wore shirts, but noticed that they wore loose-fitting pants and had heavy waists and hips. The nearest creature held up a rod or chain that emitted blue-white sparks 2 or 3 at a time, which jumped back and forth from one hand to the other just below the device. When Honeyut stepped out of the car, the being had lowered the device and appeared to tie it around one of its ankles. Honeyut's impression was that the forward figure had been signaling someone or something in the woods on the opposite side of the road. This is UFO investigator Leonard Stringfield's 1956 sketch of the strange little men encountered by Honeyut. Now, is it just me, or does the guy in the middle look like he's trying to win back his lost love, a la John Cusack, and say anything? Honeyut stepped closer, and the creatures did likewise with a peculiar, graceful motion, but the man gleaned a strong impression that he should not come any closer. As Honeyut returned to his car and pulled away, he suddenly experienced an extremely strong and penetrating odor that he compared to, quote, fresh-cut alfalfa with a slight trace of almonds. Although it was 4 a.m., Honeyut drove directly to the home of Loveland Police Chief John K. Fritz, frantically pounding on the door to awaken the officer. Fritz listened patiently to the frantic man's tale and, not detecting any alcohol on his breath, dressed and proceeded alone to the location of the sighting. The chief didn't spot anything out of the ordinary, but stated that he felt peculiar, as well as that he might be, quote, the biggest fool in Loveland. If you think the trio of creatures Honeyut describes sound more like descriptions of extraterrestrials than frog people, that would be an astute observation. Prolific UFO investigator Leonard Stringfield and his colleague Ted Blocher investigated this case in late summer 1956. It took place in the wake of the famous Hopkinsville-Kelly encounter that occurred 1 year earlier, in which residents of a Kentucky farmhouse were allegedly terrorized by a group of gremlin-like aliens from a flying saucer. Blocher directly interviewed Honeyut and Fritz. He also learned that there had been a UFO sighting from the Loveland Ground Observer Tower on Lebanon Road at 7:48 p.m. on May 24, 1955. That's about 8 hours before the chef's encounter with the little men. The UFO sighting was verified by an article printed in the June 2nd, 1955 edition of the Loveland Herald newspaper. Pungent smells like ammonia are an oft-reported aspect of numerous alleged close encounters with alien beings. There were additional witnesses to the strange little men in Loveland, according to Blocher. Early in July 1955, a 19-year-old man identified only as CF, then an auxiliary policeman with civil defense, was driving his work truck over a bridge in the Loveland area, and this was likely the one crossing the Little Miami River from Claremont County, when he noticed 4 small figures on the riverbank beneath the bridge. An awful odor blanketed the area. CF drove immediately to the police headquarters to inform Fritz, his superior, but the chief wasn't there, and those present treated the man's claim with great derision and skepticism. There were, however, rumors that police had cordoned off the bridge and that the FBI had investigated. Fritz was reluctant to discuss the incident with Blocher and denied direct knowledge of any official activity at the bridge. However, he did offer to take the investigator to meet CF at his farmhouse. It wasn't a very productive visit. The young man refused to discuss his sighting in any detail and blamed the ridicule and abuse he received for his decision to quit his job at civil defense. Fritz later explained to Blocher that CF had resigned since he wanted more responsibility than the chief felt he was ready for, and that the sighting had nothing to do with it. Blocher did manage to elicit an important factoid when he showed CF drawings of the pointy-eared humanoids seen in Kentucky. The young man stated that the beings he witnessed looked nothing like them, and they were instead 4 more or less human-looking little men about 3 feet high that were moving about oddly under the bridge, accompanied by a terrible smell. The encounter only lasted about 10 seconds. Around the same time as CF's experience, Emily Bagnone and her husband were awoken one night by their dog continually barking outside their Loveland Heights home. The couple looked out the window for prowlers and saw nothing, but were met with a foul, penetrating odor like a swamp that lingered throughout the hot summer night. The next morning, the Bagnone's neighbor told them she had also been awoken by the dog's barking. When she looked outside, there was a diminutive little man about 3 feet in height, covered in what looked like twigs and foliage, standing motionless about 15 feet from her back porch. Strangely, the creature disappeared when she flicked on the porch light and immediately reappeared when she turned the light off, repeating this process multiple times. The next step in the evolution of the Loveland Frogman legend occurred early in March 1972. Loveland police officer Ray Shockey, 23 at the time, was cruising along the Little Miami River on Riverside Drive in Loveland when he spotted, quote, an animal 2 to 3 feet tall with dark green or blackish scaly skin. The creature ducked over the bank and descended into the river. Shockey only told his immediate superiors about the incident, not wanting to alarm Loveland residents. A few days later at 6 a.m., Patrolman Mark Matthews, 21, was driving home from duty along the same road, which is Riverside Drive, Kemper Road. He was near Loveland's city limits, about a quarter mile from where Shockey's encounter took place, but still near the river. Matthews spotted the same type of creature and swung his vehicle so the headlights illuminated it. The officer said the monster appeared irritated at the interruption and stuck out its forked serpent-like tongue at him. It had a face like a frog. The patrolman exited his car and observed the animal, which he estimated stood 2 to 4 feet high. The creature hopped at Matthews but didn't display any aggression. A news report published about 2 weeks after Matthews' sighting, on March 27, stated that the patrolman fired 3 shots and presumably missed, with the creature running off toward the river. However, an April 12th report clarified that Matthews had actually shot and killed the animal with 4 bullets from his .357 Magnum because it was running away and he wanted to see what it was. But his attempt to examine the creature was for naught, as it managed a final hop into the river and was washed away. The Loveland PD decided to keep the matter quiet for the public good and to spare the department any embarrassment. Shockey and Matthews did ask an artist friend to draw the creature they had both seen, which supposedly bore a resemblance to the titular star of the 1954 film, The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Harry Wakeman, a zoologist at the Cincinnati Zoo, examined the composite sketch. While it didn't resemble any known animal, Wakeman opined that it could have been an otter or woodchuck, since the weather was too cold for an amphibian or reptile. He likewise ruled out the Goliath frog, native to Central Africa. Matthews said in April 1972 that he thought what he shot was an iguana, and he maintained that identification when interviewed decades later in 2016. He also revealed that Shockey had called him after the earlier sighting. While Matthews didn't believe that Shockey had seen a monster, he sensed from his fellow officer that something he saw had upset him. Later that month, Matthews saw the puzzling creature cross the road on 4 legs and crawl under the guardrail. It was not walking on 2 legs and climbing over the guardrail, as urban legend states. Matthews also admitted in 2016 that he had recovered the creature's body and placed it in the trunk to show Shockey, who agreed it was the same animal he had witnessed. Matthews said it was a large iguana about 3 to 3.5 feet long and was missing its tail, which is why he initially failed to recognize it. It was likely a pet that had escaped or was released when it got too large, said Matthews. He added that the sickly reptile was already half dead when he shot it. He postulated that the cold-blooded animal might have survived into the winter by keeping warm near pipes that released water used for cooling ovens at the nearby Totes boot factory. Despite its demise, the Loveland Frog lived on. During the night of August 3, 2016, Sam Jacobs and his girlfriend were playing the mobile game Pokemon Go between Loveland Madera Road and Lake Isabella when they recorded photos and video of what resembled a real-life Pokemon. According to Jacobs, it was an actual giant frog near the water that astonished the couple when it stood up and walked on its hind legs. The shaky video displays what looks like 2 bright lights in the darkness, although Fox 19 Now News lightened a frame to reveal what does indeed look like a humanoid frog with glowing eyes standing half submerged near the edge of a lake. In 1985, University of Cincinnati folklore professor Edgar Slotkin said that local stories of the Loveland Frog had survived for several decades. It might be pertinent to note that the majority of the supposed encounters in both 1955 and 1972 involved the Loveland Police Department. It is not hard to imagine that the earlier stories about little men with frog-like mouths persisted within the department and fed into the later tales of a frogman, spurred on by a tailless iguana on the loose. But when you review the entire saga of the Loveland Frog, it is clear that it straddles the line between cryptid and extraterrestrial.